Well, hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Bob and Chad, episode number 101. So, how's Chad today?
Good. We start our next 100 tonight.
Yeah, we start our next 100 tonight.
Yeah. We're pretty busy day today. Mondays are always the chaos now. There was quite a few rainouts, but we're still pretty busy today. So we're trying to get ready to go to the racetrack. We're supposed to go to we were supposed to go to Deer Creek last week. That got rained out. We're supposed to go to Fountain City this weekend for the Dairyland. That's not looking real spectacular weather-wise, but we currently don't have a factory support rig, so we're still waiting for our primary to get fixed from when it blew up going to Super Nationals, and then our FS2, we got another trailer built, and that's done today. So Josh is leaving tomorrow to get that. So with any luck, we'll get that ready to go here, so we can get to the racetrack and start seeing some people.
Well, that'd be cool. I know everything down here this weekend was all rained out. Friday night was a washout, Saturday was a washout, and it rained pretty hard both Friday and Saturday. And we got like, I think Ames area got like 2.5 inches of rain on Saturday, and so it didn't take too much to kind of kill everything. But that's kind of, you have that in April. I mean, it's not out of the ordinary to have a little bit of a rain.
Yeah, I've seen a few pictures of some racetracks that look like lakes.
Yes, no doubt. No doubt about that. Well, it was a lot of fun having Mr. Schrader on the show 2 weeks ago.
Yeah,
That was exciting. We could have spent the whole time telling stories, because he's got stories, man. There's no doubt about that.
yeah, that's for
Been
sure.
there, done that. He's raced about everything that's raceable, so yeah, he can pretty much tell you anything about anything because he's been there, done that.
Yeah,
So I showed you. I see you debuted a new product today.
yeah, we got the strong arm. I brought one with. This is
Awesome.
the Jake Tim inspired billet left rear. So this is machined from solid steel instead of being a tube. So it has a lot of strength. The more pressure that gets put on that left bottom rod, that bent rod, uh, we make a tube and we make a solid, and now we make the billet. So this one's a I-beam super strong design. Uh, I don't think you'll ever break those. If you break that, you probably went for a pretty wild ride.
Yeah, it looks like it. It looks like it's pretty beefy.
Yeah. Yeah, we're coming out of build season now, so we got a little more time to work on some new stuff. We got quite a bit of new stuff on the board that we're working on, and so hopefully we can get some of that stuff in production and to the racetrack and see what the people think of it.
That'd be good. Awesome. You guys always do a good job of keeping up with new stuff, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah. When's the Harris Clash?
Harris Clash is August 6th at Deer Creek, Minnesota. Um, Everything's going to be the same as it has been in the past. The purse is going to be a little different this year. They kind of Deer Creek Speedway didn't make out as good last year financially, so we've had to do some cuts here and there, but hopefully it'll still be a great show and we'll still get lots of cars and looking forward to it. In fact, I've been a little lax on promotion, and that's kind of on my list of things to get started on tomorrow. So we don't have any questions. I wonder if we are. I mean, it looks like we got 50 people signed up.
I see two icons on the top. Are you on the right Facebook page?
Well,
It says live on BHE, so
okay.
Amy says we're good to go.
All right.
Russell, here we go.
Well, here we go.
Here they come. Took them a while.
This took a little bit. Russell, what is the advantage of scaling with shocks unhooked, and is there a disadvantage? Well, the biggest advantage to scaling with them unhooked, with the way the shocks are nowadays, the problem we run into is like the right front's got a lot of tie down and a lot of 0 point in it. So when you go to scale a car, it takes so long because it takes so long for that thing to settle. So that's why we just unhook the shocks so that that doesn't factor into your scaling process. Because otherwise, if you jack the car up or make a change or whatever, it takes so long for the car to come back to neutral with the shocks hooked up. So we just disconnect them now. If you're running, a 4 bar car or 4 link car, with the spring, the right rear, you usually end up having to run the spring um, because you're on a coilover, and I usually leave my left rear spring hooked up just because I know it adds about 20 pounds of bite to the car. But with that gas pressure shock, once it hits the racetracks, that gas pressure doesn't really have an effect on the load on that wheel like you'd think it would. It's more of a timing device to help get the car up on the bars more. But the front, with some of them front shocks that we run, it takes forever in the day to get the car to come back to neutral. So that's kind of why we just unhook the front shocks. So it eliminates that problem. Okay, Jason, what is the rear spring table? Why is it important? Why is the height of the springs important? Why is the location of the top of the spring important with the sliders or coilovers? And why are the right rear springs getting shorter? Um, well, the spring table, and Chad's got this diagram, so I'll just let you go ahead with this, Chad.
I just keep these here because this is one of the most popular questions we have.
Yes,
So
no doubt about that.
spring table on a coilover car is where the coilover is hooked to the chassis. So in this instance, measured from the ground when the car is scaled ready to go at ride height. So you measure from the ground to the location where that hooks up to the chassis. If both sides are the same, then we call that a neutral. So that car is going to be roll fairly neutral. When you have the right side lower than the left side, which is what this is, so you see that when you measure, the distance is shorter from the ground on the right rear. So then the car is going to roll over that easier than if it was what we call a negative effect. So when the left rear is lower, then this point here has to travel over the top of that right rear point to get the car to roll. So it resists roll on the right rear. So in a really heavy, tacky circumstance, you'd want the left rear lower. When you get to the slick portion and later on at night, you want the right rear to be lower. So that's why we have a bolt-in shock drop. A lot of guys will run it neutral. A lot of cars are built neutral, where it'd be pretty close to the same left to right, and then you can bolt in a shock drop on the right rear later in the night, and then you would just move the coilover nut to adjust for the difference in height, and then that would allow that spring table to roll on the right rear. As far as the height of the spring doesn't matter on a coilover, but why they're putting a shorter spring in the right rear is because the shorter spring, as it gets closer to coil bind, is going to pop quicker than a tall spring that isn't closer to coil bind. So it stores that energy and gives you a little bit different feel on exit when that thing's kind of almost bound up on coil bind.
Well, hell, I couldn't have said it any better. That was good.
That hit them all? There was a lot of questions there.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions. I think you covered everything. Doug's got a sport mod. How much shock shaft do I have out at ride height on the left front? Are the shocks being used a little like a chain limiter in some of the mods? And how much travel is a good starting spot? A lot of times we'll run an inch shorter shaft in the left front shock just to do what we're doing with that. And then what we can do is we can put an extension on it, so that way, if you're in a situation where you don't want the shock drop, you can just put that extension on there, and then it's just exactly like your standard 7-inch shock would be. Where when you shorten that shaft up, it tends to give the car a little bit more bite. It might free it up just a little bit on corner entry, but it seems to give the car a little more bite coming off the corner, because when the car can only lift so much and then all of a sudden it has to lift that whole tire and wheel, it seems to transfer the weight to the left rear and give you a more traction up off the corner. Tim, 3-link on coilovers. Best way to free the car up coming into the corner on the throttle, but still maintain side bite. Just want to roll the corner a little better without slamming the brakes to get the car to turn. Well, that could be a numerous amount of things. I mean, it just all depends on how your wheel alignment is, how your right front is aligned in comparison to your right rear. If it's getting on the right front too quickly and loading the right rear too fast, that's going to give you an extra side bite. A lot of times, we free the car up a little bit, take some side bite out of it to the point where we kind of almost make the car free and rely on the fact that the driver's got to learn to throttle the car up under power to get the car to traction up and drive straight forward and still, be able to go through the middle of the corner better. What's your opinion, Chad?
Yeah, I think that's pretty good, I think, yeah.
Joel, for a stock car, what do you guys suggest for trailing arm bushings? Mono balls are allowed where I can race that. Well, if you can run a mono ball, I'd run a mono ball.
Yeah.
No doubt about that. If if there's something in the rules that say you can't run a mono ball, then we just run a stock bushing, like it's a Napa bushings or whatever is a good stock bushing, and they seem to work really well. But if you can run a mono ball, I'd definitely run a mono ball. What's the advantage of running a left rear coilover on an IMCA modified 4-bar versus running it on the standard shock in front, slider behind? You'll find that when you split the shock and put it on a slider and back, the car will actually drive better getting into the corner. It's going to be a lot more stable on corner entry. Both of them behind tends to be a little bit more traction in straight line condition. The problem is it can get pretty loose and get pretty free getting into the corner. So some drivers, it depends on the driver. If they're really good trail braking and they can really keep it up, they like the spring and shock combined behind the housing. But some guys like it split, and it's got more stability split. Clay, is there a better way to have the springs in front of the rear end on an IMCA stock car? Well, I don't know if you could say that there's a better way. I mean, I know the way B&B does it, I think, is pretty slick. They've got a shock or a 3-hole deal that they weld on the car so that you can be in front and be in the middle or behind. And I think that deal works pretty slick. And then you've got your option with the cups, like with our cups, you can get one cup that works either in front or behind, and then you have to have a different cup that actually works in the center. That deal's pretty slick and it works very well, very well. Seen a picture on Facebook, Clay, of your car. It looks pretty nice. On a B mod, will raising the right trailing arm only give you drive off the corner or tighten up the whole corner? Actually, it can hurt drive off the corner, but it makes the car roll through the corner better because um, it says, okay, just a second here. It makes the car roll through the middle of the corner better with the angle. Uh, Sometimes though it can hurt you off the corner. So it's kind of one of them deals where if you can give up a little bit getting off the corner to gain quite a bit in the middle, it's well worth it. That we've changed that right bar quite a bit actually. Let's see here. We got how about a 10-inch 800 in the right rear? Um, That'd be a lot of spring. Um, I've never run anything. I don't think I've been over a 350.
Yeah, I haven't ever heard anybody that high.
No, that sounds like more of a front spring to me, but whatever. Amy says, Travis Hansen says, 4-link modified, zero indexing. Does the cage index clocking matter too much or too little?
Yeah, I mean the zero index deal. I'm assuming you're talking about at ride height. You know how it's sitting there when you're scaled. We're still generally 3 degrees into the spring, so a lot of people think zero index means when the car hikes and the cage indexes, it doesn't index or it ends at zero, which is wrong. So it starts 3 into the spring and it still is indexing 15 to 20 degrees into the spring when you're going through the motions. So it definitely the cage index and the clocking all matter. The proper way to do zero index, I still feel, is to take the top rod and move it back, and the bottom rod and move it forward, and that's moving it on the frame and the cage. So we deal with a lot of people that only do one, or they do it kind of halfway, or they lengthen this rod or shorten this rod, or I still, you're changing the dynamic of the split of the bars when you do that, and it really changes the timing of the cage on entry. So I'm still a believer in the standard zero, like we still push.
Okay, Vince, if I change the right front spring in a modified or sport mod, say from a 500 to a 450 at dynamic load, will that make the entry tighter off the gas? Um, I would actually think it would make it turn better getting into the corner. Now, once you get on the throttle, it's entirely possible that it's gonna, whatever happens to the right front is gonna happen to the right rear. So if the right front gets more travel, the right rear is gonna get more travel. That's where it gets a little iffy because sometimes you can get too much right rear travel and actually make the car tight on throttle. So that soft spring helps get the car tighter or helps free the car up a little bit on corner entry. But you've got to be careful to make sure you're ready to rotate with it because it can get tight just because of a little extra side bite on that right rear tire. Okay. Hey guys, running a stock car type 3,200 pound with a 125 16-inch left rear and a 900 right front. Have a really bad push on entry. Would raising the spring weight on the right front help? Well, I mean, 3,200 pound car, 900 pound spring, you're on the verge of a little light maybe. Uh, I would say though, with that heavy of a car, you're really too light on that left rear. I think what's happening there is that left rear is smashed so much that the spring table is all screwed up in the back of the car, so it doesn't roll to the right rear like it wants to. It gets the car over on the right side, and it's just a throttle more of a power push because of that. That's the left rear spring. I think if you stiffened up the left rear spring to a 150 or something like that, I think the car would drive better. Uh, Okay, Chad, can you make a version of the ricochet shock guard for shocks with no removable rod ends?
It's not a bad idea. We could do a little clamp-on version there on like a welded rod end style shock. I'll make a note and definitely get that in line.
Um, Justin, Sport Mod, what does running a pull bar in the middle of the rear end and an inch to the right from center on the frame do if it points to the right front? Well, technically, it's supposed to traction up more. That's the theory. It all depends on how much steer you have in the car, because a lot of times when you get a lot of steer in the car, the rear end moves around a little bit. And so then all of a sudden, it might move to the left or it might move to the right, depending on how your panhard bar and stuff is in there. But that's common. I mean, center of the rear end is pretty common, and ours are, we run them an inch to the right just because limited horsepower. I think we can get too much traction in the. I mean, a lot of people think these cars don't have enough traction, but to be honest with you, I think a lot of them have too much traction, and that's really their big problem. Is they're hooked up so hard that the power that we have, even though we can run an open motor, the car's it's just hooked up too much, and we kill phase two of the corner, and it makes the car slow in the middle of the corner. So, in my opinion, how you're running it there, Justin, is that's how we run it. I like that setup myself. I think it works really well. Drew says Terry could soften the right rear. Yeah, depends on what he's running for spring. Or is that 800-pound guy?
Yeah, that's the 900 right front, 125 left rear.
Yeah. Still, it's 3,200-pound cars. That's a lot of car for that soft a spring. Thanks, guys. I love the show. I was just joking about the 800-pound right rear. I was pretty sure that might have been the case.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if you were on a pull down rig and it told you to put 800 in the right rear or what happened there.
Yeah. Yeah, I was in the back of my mind. I was thinking, wonder how that works. Guy could put a strut rod in there too, and be very similar.
I think the only time I ever had an 800-pound spring in was when we took the asphalt car to Milwaukee, and you had to have an 800 in the right rear. So,
Wow.
But that was an asphalt car.
Kevin, on an IMCA or Northeast Street Stock 3,000-pound car, do you run a heavier spring on the left front or the right front? We always run a heavier spring. Those cars tend to be free getting in, so we always run a heavier spring on the left front to help tighten the car up, keep side bite in, because they're notoriously a little short on side bite on those cars because you don't run a lot of rear percentage. And they tend to be a little short on side bites. So it's pretty common to run 300 pounds more spring in the left front than in the right front. I mean, it just all depends on how tight you want the car to get in. That's the only place that spring is going to make any difference for you is on corner entry, and it's just keeping the car loaded on the right rear a little longer. IMCA AMOD, thoughts on left rear shock in front of the axle attached to a bird cage versus mounted behind the axle, behind and on the axle. Well, I've never actually tried that behind the housing. We've tried in front of the housing with the shock on a separate mount rather than the cage. And I think there's definitely some traction to that. I think that works really good. In fact, I don't know why we ever went away from that, because I always thought we did that. The year Jeff Taylor had won the Super Nationals, that's how he had his car set up, was with that shock in front of the housing on a separate mount. But I've never run one behind. So I couldn't tell you. Every time I've ever run one behind, it's always been on the coilover. So how big is your new trailer that you're getting, Chad?
It's a 28-foot gooseneck.
Okay. That'll be a nice size.
Yeah, that we had the little van and just, man, the steel parts are heavy. We had that baby overloaded. So
Yeah. Yeah, no, it wouldn't take too many. A lot of weird parts would definitely overload that thing. I could sure see that.
yeah. What's the plan this weekend?
Um, well, by the weather, it looks like the plan's going to be watching it rain again. Um, I, it's not looking real good down here because, like I said, the problem it looks like we're going to get rain Tuesday night, Wednesday, and Thursday. Friday looks good, but I don't, it depends on how much rain we get those 3 days because I don't know how they'd be able to get a racetrack put together. Saturday night doesn't look real strong. We're a fair amount of rain forecast. Of course, that can all change, but that's kind of what it looks like right now. It's supposed to be like 80 degrees down here tomorrow. Jesse, street stock. Have you ever heard of running a taller left front spring than the right? Well, yeah, that's pretty common. Um, I think you've got to be like the IMCA rules. I think you can go up to an 11-inch spring on the. Uh, I think the rules state something like somewhere between 8 and 11 inches. I don't think you can be shorter or longer than that, but either way, and yeah, that's pretty common running a taller left front spring.
Yeah, it's going to change the spring table. So the
Yeah,
tall left front spring is going to raise the spring table on the left front and make the car roll over onto the right front.
yeah, I would agree. Um, any rule of thumb as for mounting the fuel cell? Um, well, of course, we've always mounted in a 1-inch cage and then mounted the cage in there. Height wise, I run the fuel cell pretty much as high as I can run it. Like an inch from the deck or whatever, and pretty much centered. And I run it as close to the rear end as I can possibly run it and still be able to change gears and all that good stuff. But you definitely need to mount it good because, of course, if that fuel cell comes out of there, that's not a good deal. Tony says that you should sponsor some cars that race down here in Florida at Volusia Speedway Park. Awesome. Well, it sounds like a great idea. I don't know if we'll get it worked out, but it sounds like a great idea. On an IMCA Sport Mod, can you touch on changing the timing of the rear end, and is it different for each side of the car? What do you think that question's actually asking?
I'd say moving the arms up on the cages, I would assume.
Oh, yeah.
So right rear up, left rear down.
Yeah, we play a lot with that. We leave the left rear down and have the angle in it because I want to get as much angle in that left rear as I possibly can. The right rear, we play with that quite a bit. You got to be a little careful because when you do raise it up on the cage, it's going to tighten the car up. Definitely tighten the car up. So you're going to want to have a little bit more angle in your right rear trailing arm than you normally would, just because of the fact that it's going to traction it up a little bit. and it's going to hurt the car a little bit in the middle of the corner. So as long as you got an angle in it, that's definitely a traction device, and we run that. We play with that quite a bit. Let's see here. Tony, thoughts on rear spring load on an A-mod on a half-mile slick? Boy, I wouldn't know what to tell you there.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have a lot of load numbers to compare. Nobody tells me anything anymore because I talk to too many people.
Yeah.
I would get with your chassis builder and get some baseline loads and just tune accordingly.
Yeah, that would be your best bet, Tony. Marcus, what does the left rear inside the coilover mounted behind the axle do?
Oh, he's talking about, that's the question from before. So he's asking about coilover. Left rear coilover behind, not on the axle. Broke my chair.
The left rear coilover behind actually does it does give you a little bit more traction off the corner. The problem is it doesn't. It kind of can free the car up quite a bit getting into the corner. So some guys don't like it just because of the fact that it gets the car free on corner entry. Um, and so they kind of lose a little bit, in phase one and phase two. So, the car, what they gain coming off the corner, sometimes it can be lost, getting in and through the middle of the corner because it doesn't rotate as good. But it kind of depends on the racetrack. Some racetracks, it works better than others. And some drivers just like the consistent, like I said before, if you're a really good trail breaker, the deal behind the housing works pretty good. It's just it can make the car a little free getting into the corner. Drew, what are you seeing that guys are doing to get the attitude back in the stock cars with the new ride heights so they don't be so flat? Um, and I haven't worked with a lot of stock cars yet this year. I haven't actually been to many races, so I'm not sure I can actually help you a whole lot with that deal. I know um, both my guys that run stock cars, they seem to be changing things fairly often, so I haven't kept up with what their changes are. Some guys have got it figured out pretty good, and some guys it's not going as well as it could go. So I can't. I would be hurting you if I even give you any advice on that because I'm not that knowledgeable on that deal. Uh, Kevin says, "Thanks. I'm thinking of running the 1050 in the left front and the 900 in the right front with 30 pounds of wedge. Thoughts on that?" I think that sounds pretty good. You might want a little bit more wedge than that. That wedge number sounds a little soft. Something more in the 60 to 80 pound range, probably. We run our stuff close to 100. Seems to work pretty good with the stock cars because they do roll quite a bit. Jerry, on a metric chassis, what effect does the right rear lower trailing arm have, and what angle would you start with? We're running that right rear trailing arm relatively flat, maybe 5 degrees up at the most. That seems to keep the steer out of the car on the right rear, makes the car traction up a little better coming up off the corner, and as much angle as I can get in my left rear. 20 degrees is pretty reasonable. I run that more. Now, if you run something that's a high bank, heavy type racetrack, putting more angle in that right rear definitely will free the car up, but it takes traction out of the car. Um, we had a car, a customer that I had talked to that ran a week or so ago, and his car was toting the left front quite a bit. So I had him put angle in it, which I thought that would help settle the car down, and it didn't. All it did was cost him traction off the corner. On an IMCA stock car, my right rear is very, very hot after 10 laps. What do I do to reduce the heat? Well, that's telling you that the right rear is not actually, it's spinning and not actually working. So you need to actually move some lead around, depending on what your spring is in that, you maybe go to a little stiffer spring in that right rear so that it hooks that right rear up a little bit more. Uh, take some angle out of that right rear bar, run that right rear trailing arm a little flatter to get that tire to work a little bit more. Because if that tire is super hot, that's the tire that's slipping. He's got a 250 right rear spring in there. That's pretty common, 250, 275. I mean, that's pretty normal with those cars. So you're right on the spring rate. I would probably play with my trailing arm angles. Let's see. Kevin said his is, oh yeah, that's that 3,000 pound car. Yep, I got that. Um, yeah, it would be nice if they did get to race this weekend. I mean, I know the racetracks, everybody's pretty much ready to go racing. We've been doing a lot of scale jobs and kind of that stuff, get cars ready to go to the racetrack. Um, Tony says he's got 60 pounds of side bite. For a stock car, 60 pounds on the left rear is a little light, but you would think that would help that right rear bite more, but um, that would be my suggestion is flatten that right rear trailing arm out a little bit more. Put more angle in the left rear if you can. And it kind of depends too, how's it enter into the corner? Because I mean, if it's free getting in, you could put some more spring in the left front to help get that car on the right rear a little bit more, and work that right rear a little harder. Does it matter if my front is 58 inches wide and my rear is 60 inches wide? Do you drive square cars? Yeah, I really like to see the front end wider than the rear end. That's definitely going to make that tire. It's going to make the car probably freer with the rear end being wider, which is going to cause that right rear to possibly be hot. Um, you know, I would consider. I mean, if they let you run wheel spacers, or if you run different offset wheels, I'd widen my front end out. Acceptable bump steer. Right front bumps out 20 thousandths, first half inch or so, back to 3 out at an inch. Ends up being about 80 thousandths out at compression. Left front is bumping about 30, 1 inches shock rebound. It's a fight. LOL. Should I cock the right front back and reduce bump steer, or just live with the initial bump steer? And sorry for the long text. Shock stuff is ridiculous. In today's world, that bump steers, what you got there is really not all that bad. I mean, I've seen stuff run more than that. Um, it would be nice to get it closer, but with the stock parts that we have, it's a nightmare trying to get that stuff closer. And I'm not so sure, unless we ran 50 lap races on a dry slick racetrack, I'm not sure your car is going to notice the difference between 80 thousandths and 100 thousandths, in my opinion. I used to be pretty stuffed on that stuff and make sure that stuff was pretty accurate. And we still get it pretty accurate. I think we've got ours, our right front bumps out at 3 inches of travel, it bumps out 50 thousandths. And the left front, yeah, you're good on the left front. That's pretty good. Okay, I gotta go back here.
Tommy says 3-inch backspace, but I don't know if you can run different offsets all the way around.
Yeah, well, maybe the rules say, yeah. James, on a modified or sport mod, does raising the pull bar on the chassis side do it in terms of weight transfer from the front to back on the car? I don't know if I could actually say it really makes a ton of difference. I think the big thing is trying to be in that 11 to 12 inches above center on the rear end, and then about a 15-degree angle on the bars where normally we actually go. Freeze the backspace of the wheels. Yeah, so you're kind of stuck. There's not much you can do about that. What air pressure for a hobby stock? Well, that's a great question. And if I had one of my books with me, and I think all of my class books are at the shop. Without looking it up, Jane or Slim, I don't know what to tell you on that, but maybe one of my guys are listening and they can chime in on what one of the hobby stock guys can chime in and give us some sort of a recommendation. I know I have it in my school books that we do the classes with, but I don't have it off the top of my head. Chad, do you have anything that we can put on the brake pedal to keep us from overheating the brakes?
I think some of the master cylinders you can put a bigger spring in, right, to push the pedal back harder. So if you hold your foot there, you're not actually pushing on the brakes until you actually push it. That might be a Ben Baker question.
I've actually always used to run a return spring, that would actually pull the pedal back. It's just pull the pedal back itself. Kind of like a carburetor return spring, only a little bit beefier. Looking for more forward bite from the middle out. What would you recommend for trailing arm angles at a bank racetrack? Great question you have there, Michael. Need a little bit more information as far as, are you running a sport mod, a 2-link type car, or a 4-link type car? What type of car are you actually racing? Heath, I've seen a trend lately of some IMCA modifieds running a 3 off on the left front so they can run a 2 off spacer on the right front. Is your opinion, and what does that do? Well, basically what it does is it puts a little bit more left side weight in the car, sticks the right front out, which in turn, when you stick the right front out, your actual wheel rate, as far as your wheel to spring rate, is softer. So the car's going to want to roll on the right front a little bit smoother, because you've got more of a leverage factor there, and moving the left front in, you still have to meet that width rule that they have now, so that the cars can't be over too wide, because what some people are running 1-inch offset wheels with a 1-inch spacer, and they were just getting the front of these cars so wide. So I know IMCA has a rule now that the front end can only be so wide. Keaton, what's wrong with my Smasher? Just kidding. Love tuning into you guys.
Well, Keaton, I think we need to take the top panel and send her into the clinic so we can take a look at her, I think is the general consensus here. So give me a call tomorrow. We can get that taken care of.
Well, heck. Tommy, my trailing arm left rear is completely down, and my right rear is on the top. Um, well, I would actually say that should be the other way around. I would have more angle in my left rear than I do my right rear. My right rear, if it's an adjustable type of a situation, I don't ever run more than 7 degrees in my right rear trailing arm, and we'll run 25, 28 degrees in the left rear trailing arm on a two-link car. Now, a stock car, you can't get that much, but you can get 20 degrees easily on the left rear of a stock car. Well, there's some, I've been watching on Facebook, there's a lot of big paying races coming up here in the Midwest.
Yeah, in a couple of weeks we got that 100,000 to win at Fountain City here. That's going to be a show. Yep. Mixing all them classes together, and seems like a lot of guys are skeptical about that deal.
Yeah, I probably won't comment on that. I probably won't go. Sounds to me like it could be a little confusing. We've got that sport mod race that's supposed to pay $25,000 to win at Clay County Speedway coming up here in a couple of weeks. And big stock car show up there too. I don't know. I don't actually remember what the payout was on that, but I know there's a big stock car race coming up there too. So I know next week the guys can run Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday stock cars, and all four of those shows I think pay $2,000 to win.
Wow.
So stock car boys will have a pretty busy week. Slim, what front springs on a hobby stock? I'm gonna have to bring one of those books home so I have that here. You know, like I said, I don't work with a lot of the hobby stock guys, so I'm not as familiar with the spring rates as what I should be. I'm thinking that they're pretty common for those cars to be like a left front's about an 1,100-pound spring and the right front's around a 900-pound spring, but that's just a guess. Marcus, on an A-mod, in your opinion, when would be a good time to shorten up the right rear chain? Well, the right rear chain, that's a pretty sensitive adjustment because if you get on a real smooth racetrack, there's some advantages to that, and there can be some traction that can be had. But if there's a ripple in the racetrack or a rut in the racetrack, and that thing can stick so hard side bite wise, and the front end can't keep up with it. So I would be real careful on track conditions. It would have to be really smooth and really slick for me to shorten that right rear chain up at all. I would rather do it with a shock where you had a stiffer rebound shock to kind of hold that car down there timing wise a little bit longer and not restrict the movement. Tommy said maybe he didn't have enough air, 16 pounds on the right rear. Well, I mean, that's, I don't know what tire you're running, but I know the IMCA tire, that's 15 to 16 pounds is pretty common.
What's the date of the next one? 2 weeks?
2 weeks from today, so that would be, today's the 29th, so that would be the 13th, right? Yeah, 13th.
Looks right. Yep.
Jerry, what would be the heaviest spring you'd be comfortable with pulling down with a load stick?
So if it's one of our load sticks, we're fairly comfortable going to 3,000, 3,500, no problem. Especially with the new tube we made. I would just always be careful with, the load sticks. Obviously, you're taking a spring, you're compressing it, you're putting under a lot of load. So we want to make sure that the threaded rod's lubricated so that it moves freely. Keep your arms, your fingers, and stay out from underneath there. And we recommend keeping a jack underneath the control arm. So if something would fail, then you got a little bit of a savior there to not scare you as bad with that jack underneath there. But yeah, you always want to stay out of the way. And we haven't had any. Really, the only failure we had was when the nut manufacturer gave us the wrong material, and we had to recall about 300 load sticks. But thankfully, nobody got hurt there. But load sticks are a valuable tool in your toolbox, but always remember that they're under a lot of force.
Brandon says, do you buy into the advertised advantage of the Swift tight helix springs? I myself have not seen the proof that there's a big advantage to that spring. Now, there's a lot of guys that run that spring and win races on it, so I'm not saying that it isn't. But when you put it in the spring compressor and you go through the motions, it has to get quite a bit of travel for that to actually do what it says it's supposed to do. And so I don't know whether I didn't try it with a soft enough spring to get that advantage, so I couldn't really tell you for sure. Um, I'm not a fan of things that are variable. I like, just a consistent spring has always been, I'm kind of old school.
I would agree, and I think it's kind of more of a situation also. You gotta, like you said, you gotta have enough travel. But then when you get to that point of where that tight helix is coil binding and giving you that reverse rebound rate, if you hit a hole, if you're on the cushion and that spring's coil binding, you're gonna destroy your car. So you really got to be careful, I think.
It definitely puts some weight on the right rear axle tube because that spring is heavy. Let's see, where are we at time-wise here? 7:56. Well, we got time for a couple more questions, and then we'll be getting ready for 2 weeks from now. One guy never got back to us on whether he was running a 4-link car or a 2-link car that wanted the angles on those trailing arms.
Yeah, hopefully we can get this weekend in and Mother Nature cooperates with us.
Yeah, that'll be nice. I mean, like I said, everybody's ready to go racing, and people are getting kind of to that point where they're just ready to go. Tracks are ready to have some shows, and they've worked throughout the winter, getting everything where it's ready and made all their stuff ready to go. And Heath wants to know, have you ever found that zero indexing on a modified makes the car all around tighter than conventional? I can't say that I've actually found that.
The general consensus is it kind of makes the car freer on entry, but gives the traction off, I think is kind of the general consensus.
That's kind of what I've always found, that you have to tighten the car up a little bit more on corner entry but it will tighten itself up off the corner better because you're not taking the chance of bar locking that thing and getting a wheel hop, and it's just more consistent. Thoughts on a push with a slow entry, but turns well if I drive it hard into the corner. Thinking it needs more right front spring. Push with slow entry, but driven harder into the corner, thinking it needs more right front spring. Actually, I wouldn't.
No, if
I
it's
just
pushing,
keep driving it harder.
if you're going slow and it's pushing and you put more spring rate in and it doesn't travel, it's going to push worse.
Yeah, no, I would I would not change the spring rate. I'd definitely maybe soften up the left front spring so that the right rear doesn't stick so much. Something like that might help the car. But yeah, it sounds to me like that if you drive the car in harder, that's getting it on the right front where you want it to be, and getting it on the right rear more. So it might just be you need to unhook the right rear a little bit more if you want to go in slower. Have you ever messed with a narrower wheel on the right front to increase tire patch? Thoughts? I've not actually messed with the narrower wheel, Brandon, on the right front because I like that wheel to be wider, or at least as wide as I can get it, because it just helps the motion ratio on that right front spring not be so sensitive. And I think it just allows the car to roll into the corner better, drives in a little bit better, in my opinion. Marcus wants to know, what's the advantage or disadvantage of the spring pull bar versus a biscuit style pull bar?
I would say that the spring is a little bit more tunable. The springs tend to last just a little bit longer. Depends on the car too. What you're comparing to here, but biscuit style, like sleeve style biscuit bars, are a lot of work, a lot of maintenance. A lot of people do like them. The open spring puck combo bars are pretty popular. I know that's I think Bob's go-to, and it's one of our most popular one here with the spring and the pucks together in combo. Very good tunability when you add the spring and the puck together, and good longevity. But obviously, the pull bar gets destroyed every lap and is a consumable. And I don't like to see anything go past 25 nights, whether it's a spring or a biscuit.
Biscuit bar will make the car a little tighter getting into the corner. Spring will actually make the car a little freer getting into the corner. So it kind of depends a little bit on driver, you know, how the driver likes to drive the car into the corner. The biscuit bar will actually stick the right rear a little harder getting into the corner. Thoughts on a 4 compression, 12 rebound right front shock, and a 10 compression, 2 rebound left rear shock on a tacky racetrack? I think that sounds pretty good. That's a very common number that we see used quite a bit. Yeah, that'd be a good go-to. I think that's a very basic combination. All right, guys. Well, it's been nice. We've had a great night again tonight, and we appreciate everybody logging on here and asking questions. And thanks, Chad, again for all your work on this show.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. See you in a couple weeks.
Yep.